I'm Rick Botman, engineer for MARE. We've been setting up for today's cruise for about a day. We come down with a whole truckload of equipment and then spend a little time setting it up. What we have are the full complement of instruments and computers to control the ROV and capture the data that we need to for our surveys. The full operation of the ROV usually takes 3 people, so I describe it in terms of 3 different stations. There's a pilot station right here in front where the pilot holds a hand controller and flies. We use the term flies the ROV down on the sea floor. It's a little bit of a trick to operate a robot remotely. So our pilots have a lot of experience in understanding how to navigate through hazards and how to go through fishing lines, for example. So they want as much information as possible about what the robot is doing. So we give them a forward view, we give them a down camera, we give them a rear-looking camera, we give them sonar, and we have a few other tricks as well. They're all meant to give awareness to the pilot, plus help us with our data collection. So the pilot sits here, he has a full view of everything going on the vehicle, plus he has a navigational map which is put up by the navigator, which tells him where he's supposed to go. When we're doing scientific surveys, we set out a grid using a proper sampling methodology of the area on the seafloor, the habitat that we're going to survey. And so the pilot's job is to navigate through that carefully planned survey in order to capture the data that will then become a baseline or a record of all the species that we see in that area. So that's the pilot station. Next to the pilot sits the navigator. The navigator controls the map. The navigator controls the recording of all the instruments that we see on the video from the ROV. So the navigator is in charge of where are we in the world, where's the boat, where is the ROV relative to the boat, which is a tricky thing because the ROV, we can't put a GPS on the ROV, so we have to track the ROV using an acoustic signal coming from the boat, and the navigator is in charge of that. So the navigator is basically keeping an eye on all of the instruments, all of the computers, updating the map with plans for where the ROV will go next, and starting and stopping the recording of all the data that we use then for the sampling. On the other side over here, there's a third station. This is typically the science station, where if we have biologists that we're working with or other scientists, they'll sit here and they'll monitor where we're piloting, and they'll ask the pilot, could you stop for a second? We want to look more closely at this sample, or can we go back and take another look at that other coral or fish that we saw? And then we also have a hand control here that the scientists can use to take pictures. We have a high resolution digital stills camera on the ROV, and so the scientist can say, oh, I want to take a picture of that coral, and the pilot will navigate over to the coral, and then the scientist will take pictures. So there's a nice dialogue that goes on between the science team and the ROV team about what the day's mission is, and then once we're on the bottom, how to best collect the data that we see. That's about it for the equipment. We also have on deck Steve, our deck officer, who you heard give a safety briefing. And his responsibility is landing the ROV and deploying the ROV. And he also tends what we call a clump weight. Clump weight is a bunch of lead that's used to hold the umbilical down beneath the ship. We could draw a picture and talk about how ROVs work, but I'd like to give an example. The ROV is not very powerful, and it sits down at the bottom of a long cable, almost a kilometer if we go deep enough. And so the ROV is down at the bottom of a kilometer of cable. That's a really long way to go. And the ship is operating way above that ROV. And the trick is that the two have to work together, right? The ROV pilot and the ship's captain, the helm, have to work together. Otherwise, the ship will just pull the ROV off the bottom and we won't get any data at all. So we provide navigation information to the helm, we have radio information, and we have video information that's also given to the helm. In many ways, the helm is the key fourth part of the ROV team, on top of the pilot, navigator, and scientist. Ship right to the Galapagos. All right, so the propulsion for the ROV is provided by thrusters, electric thrusters. We have one lateral thruster to help going sideways, one vertical thruster to help going up and down, and then two fore and aft thrusters here in the back to help us go forward and aft. So the vehicle is pretty nimble in the water. The umbilical that we have on deck here is about 300 meters out of a total of 900 that we have on a winch up there. It has 2 fiber optic cables in it and copper wire. So it's a careful calculation. We want the cable to be as thin as possible and as light as possible.
Oh yeah.
So we don't have to, so the thrusters don't have to drag that cable around.
Exactly.
But if we make the cable too thin, then we can't put enough power down for the thrusters. So it's a balancing act. All right. The other elements of the ROV is the forward camera here. That's on a tilt play tray. Next to the forward camera is what we call an altimeter, an acoustic device that sends a pulse of sound in the water and measures how far to the subject that the camera is looking at. Underneath the camera we have 2 lasers, red lasers that are spaced 10 centimeters apart. You'll see it on the video. We use that to measure fish approximately. So when the fish has 2 laser dots on them, you can say, well, that's 10 centimeters apart, so the overall fish is probably, you know, 40 centimeters across, something like that. We also have a downward facing camera, that's here. Down below there's a stills camera that we use, the science team uses to take still pictures. We also have a little rear facing camera here that helps in case we get snagged. We hope we never get snagged. We have a sonar unit here, and you may have seen the sonar display on the pilot's view. It looks like a pie wedge and it's orange shaped. So that helps the pilot see further ahead than the lights can see. The water is got suspended particles in it, so the light doesn't penetrate very far.
Right.
Light maybe goes 5 meters. At the depth that we go to, 300 meters, it's very dark. Light maybe only goes 5 meters, but the sonar can go 50 or almost 100 meters. So that will help the pilot see rocks or see obstacles well before they show up in the lights. We also have 2 tracking beacons, this and this. These are acoustic beacons that help us locate the ROV relative to the ship. On the side of the ship, we have a pole that will lower in the water with a microphone.
Yeah.
Actually 3 microphones. The microphones will emit a ping. These will hear the ping and then respond. And then based on the different arrival time at each of the 3 microphones, we can triangulate the location of the ROV. And so that will show, that's the map that you see where the boat is, and we see the ROV somewhere around the boat. That map is developed based on the result of this tracking.
Nothing. Just as you were.
Carry on. All right. Aside from that, we have a CTD instrument here.
A what?
It's acronym CTD, conductivity, temperature, and depth. It also has a dissolved oxygen sensor, so it has a little pump constantly sampling the water, and it tells us what the O2 is in the water, the dissolved oxygen, which is what the fish need to breathe. So sometimes we'll enter a pocket of water where there's no oxygen, and that helps us evaluate why there are no fish in an area or why the conditions might be good in an area for fish. It also tells us conductivity and temperature and depth. So we record all of that information as part of our data sampling for the particular habitat that we're looking at. Under these covers are bottles or pressure housings that are full of electronics.
Full of what?
Electronics.
Okay.
The pressure that the ROV faces at depth is incredible, right?
It must be,
yeah, it's 1,500 psi. Sorry? Oh, hello. I'm sorry.
No, we're just fine.
I didn't realize I had a...
You had an audio.
I didn't realize the upper galley is...
The peanut gallery.
Yeah, we'll start throwing stuff if it's really bad.
Yeah. My name's Rick. I'm an engineer, help develop and maintain the vehicle. Was just giving a little bit of a tour and talking about the challenge of operating sensitive electronic equipment at depth underwater. The pressure that the water forces down on the vehicle at depth that we like to survey is incredible. It's 1,500 psi at 1,000 meters. So it would crush any electronics that we normally provide. So we spend a lot of time putting things in housings that are quite durable and heavy. The electronics inside might just be a camera like anyone could operate, but the housing has to be able to withstand that pressure. There we go.
Okay, so on the upper left corner we can see the number of turns the vehicle's made. This is how many times it's turned around in a circle, plus or minus. And so we always like to reset that to 0 before we come to the surface, so we don't put a lot of kinks and turns into the line like a pigtail. Then the time underneath that, that's actually how long the vehicle's been on. So it's been on for 3 hours and 17 minutes so far today. Then we have depth, going down again on the left side, depth, the altitude off the bottom, the camera's tilt, so what angle the camera is tilted at, the pitch of the vehicle and the roll, and then over here we end up with the date. This is on the right side now, the date, what time it is. This is Greenwich Mean Time, so it's kind of a UCT, Universal Time Code, which helps us link all of our data observations. We just use that as time rather than local. And then we have screen width and range, which we use those for data processing. And then the main thing in the middle is the heading, and that tells us which direction we're facing. So we're right now pointing 150 degrees.
Great. And your name?
I'm Andy Lauerman. I'm a biologist with Marine Applied Research and Exploration.
The bottom.
Yes. Well, there's fish. So now you can see the altitude. We're about 1.8 meters above the bottom. Yeah.
344 meters.
Yeah, it's pretty deep.
Yes.
Star.
Manganese nodules.
Here we go.
Manganese nodules. All right, so now we're getting into the good stuff.
So that's coral?
No, these are rocks, but you can see there's a spotted rockfish hiding out of the rocks there.
Oh,
And these sort of feathery looking things are crinoids, which are very, very ancient animals. Slot lobsters.
Back down just a little bit.
Yeah. Might be Lophelia coral. Hard to tell, but what do you think that is, Dirk? It does look like. Yeah. I don't know what. I mean, it's a odd color. Ophelia is usually white. It's kind of cool to think that no one has ever seen this before.
I'm going to try and take it. Can you take a picture? Don't worry, birds on the board.
Two different species of rockfish right next to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a sponge.
Really?
Corals and sponges are both really important for creating structure on the seafloor, and it's the same principle as an old-growth forest. The more complicated the structure is, the more niches there are, and so the more life it can support.
Oh.
And so that's why the coral reefs, for example, have such rich biodiversity, because there's so many little nooks and crannies for things to live, and different kinds of creatures can take different life paths.